Yeah. The malarkey has begun. Testicles 1, 2, testicles 1, 2, Russ.
Two.
Here we are on Under the Bar podcast for another very special episode. Sometimes Rawdon and I wonder, I know what it's like when I listen to other people's podcasts, and some
they're
of them
professional.
I have a very special connection with, and it makes, it brings some light into my day. And sometimes I wonder what the experience the Under the Bar listener is having right now as we start this thing
journey.
We're very lucky, there are people out there that tune in regularly, and if it wasn't for them, I don't know what we'd do.
Well, look, we'd probably still do what we do. Maybe it would on the editing floor. It would just stay down there.
Just stay down
the
there.
reels.
Yeah,
we'll be clambering over all the reels when we come into the studio. But no, we are. Maybe we don't give the guys and girls out there enough.
I don't think we do.
Shout out.
I don't think we do.
And I think we had some sort of question.
We had a question. If it wasn't for that, I would have totally forgotten this.
Yes.
So
that's how we roll.
This is from Chin. Chin is a strength and conditioning coach in Singapore. And,
female? Chin, it could be female. She could be hot. Hey, Chin, if you're hot, hi. It's Rawdon. If you're a dude, you're a hot dude, I'm down with that too, whatever.
Yep.
Nothing wrong with that.
Hi, Tom and Rawdon.
Hello, Chin.
My name is Chin, and I am a listener over here in Singapore. Thank you for all the podcasts to date.
No worries, mate.
Please keep up with the brilliant quality of content. Chin, what are you talking about?
Mate, is he talking? He's probably talking about Joe Rogan or something.
Yeah. I have an athlete that is currently based in Perth and is looking to add some quality supplements to her hectic schedule. Life and training. Well, the athlete is female, Rawdon, so you might want to get in there and
there's no name left, so we'll just
loosen Perth, a few things up.
Perth-based female.
There has been mention of a supplement company on the UTB podcast. It sounds like Sabido. Sabido.
Sabido.
That's because every time we say Sabido, we go Sabido.
That was a very good description there, but yeah, Sabido.
My Google search of various permutations of this came up with everything except a nutritional supplement company. Would you mind sharing the correct spelling of the company and directing me to the website / Facebook, etc. of this brand? Thank you. Best regards, Chin. Right.
All right. Well, first thing, why don't we get Cam to just open up Sabido on his... Because we've got a Wookiee in studio. He can find out the exact... Or do you know off the top of your head the website?
Well, let's just initially...
First things first.
Why don't we spell Sabido? So Sabido is spelled Subito.
Now, for our listeners, Tom did actually write that down.
I wrote
just
that
double
down.
Check. Cross-reference.
And from as far as I understand, Subito is Italian for rapid.
Yeah, it is something swanky, yeah.
I think that's what it is. So Subito.
Immediate. Oh, we got Cam, our Wookiee.
And
what is it, Cam?
Immediately. Italian for immediately.
That'll be
immediately.
Right. Immediately get results, perhaps.
That way hydrolyze. I mean, it's
immediately into the bloodstream.
Out of the gut into the bloodstream.
The EAAs do that too.
And the fast carbs.
Fast carbs, exactly. Straight through.
And so you just look, if you Google Subito supplements, I believe
And
that
spell that again, Tom.
is SB SUBITO Sabito.
Yep.
Sabito.
So that's what's throwing him, Tom.
I know.
Sabito. Just protein, mate.
Sabito.
It's protein.
Protein. So yes, that's
Okay.
that. So does that answer?
I think so.
I think that probably.
I think there'll be some supplements there that could be appropriate for his female, female client in Perth.
High performance supplements.
High performance supplements. You bet.
Yeah. Okay, so that's that. We're happy with that.
Okay, good. Done.
That's done.
Next,
our guest today on the podcast is our regular friend and industry
not a foe
extraordinaire.
It's not a foe.
Lucid Luke Tulloch.
Sorry. Lucid anymore, mate. It's Flex.
Now of Flex Success.
Yes.
Groundskeeper Willy.
Lizzie, Dean, Alan, Dalton, the
good
crew.
Team. Yep.
And there's
crew.
some crazy dude from the Netherlands or something with a big Viking-like beard. He looks. Apparently, I spoke to Dean. Sorry if he's listening. I don't remember his name, but a really interesting-looking cat from overseas. And I gather he's as enthusiastic and passionate about health and fitness as the rest of the team. So yeah, if anyone wants to check it out, like go onto Flex Instagram or Facebook pages, Flex Success, and you'll see this guy. You'll love it. It's just, like Groundskeeper Willy is pretty wild. This guy looks like almost like a equivalent to Groundskeeper Willy. He's quite jacked, big fiery red beard.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's crazy looking dude. But, another one to the team.
So Luke Tulloch is on the show today.
Getting back to Luke.
Talking some more physiology-based content. We're looking at a study that was done basically around adaptive thermogenesis.
Yes.
Rawdon, do you have the details of the study there that you can just overview for our listener?
So if they do want to check it out, it's constraint. This is in PubMed. If they go into PubMed, the database, the constrained total energy expenditure and metabolic adaptation to physical activity in adult humans, 2016. But if you punch that in, and I think that was the one. Remember, I said it was this guy. But so anyway, Luke sent it through to us. But that is if they want to see the meat and nuts of it. But
I don't worry with the meat and nuts of studies.
I just go straight to the conclusion.
Yes. Or I'll ask Luke, and
exactly.
That's good enough for me.
But really interesting. Luke will break it down. We won't give too much away in this intro, but really fascinating. And it's essentially, I guess, how the body will adaptive thermogenesis, to utilizing less energy than what it actually needs due to a certain environment or a certain scenario. And you have something firsthand with one of the guys you are involved with.
Yes, mate. And this is the timing very synchronistic for this. So basically, a client going to run the City to Surf in, I don't know, maybe it's 6-7 weeks.
Yep.
Has been doing a little bit of running just once a week.
Bit of training.
Resistance training is the bulk of his domain.
That's the meat and nuts.
That's the meat and nuts. A little bit of sprafter on the side. He's doing some running, so he does one run a week. Fit, healthy guy. Starting off with 7Ks, and he's got this app which tracks your run, it tracks your heart rate, it tracks your...
Has he got some sort of sensor that he's wearing as well?
Some sort of watch or sensor. It gives you a breakdown of the fastest K you did, the split of Ks, your fastest running pace, your highest heart rate. It gets all that data, and they probably sell it off to insurance companies to determine what premiums to sell you.
Okay.
But it also gives calories expended for the run.
Okay.
Which, and who knows how accurate this stuff is, but
so it's based on heart rate, that type of stuff, I'm assuming.
And
speed.
Body weight, body mass, and all that kind of stuff. He did a 7K run in week 1 and burnt 560 calories.
Okay, yep.
He did the same.
That's about right.
He did, nice. He did the same run again the following Wednesday. He did it slightly faster.
Okay, so a few more calories burnt.
Well, you would assume so. He did it slightly faster, but he had, I think, a slightly lower max heart rate for the run.
A little lighter on the scales as well.
He had dropped maybe 500 grams scale weight, perhaps. Calories from 560 down to 490.
That's
so
it's a bit less.
It's a little bit less. Now, this is an individual who's obviously quite fit. The adaptation to even just the running technique and trying to be more efficient with what he's doing.
Yep.
But
Movement
it's just
efficiency.
a very interesting example, Rawdon, right there. The diminishing returns with cardiovascular training if you're basically using it for the fat loss method.
Sole purpose, yeah.
The sole purpose of manipulating energy reserves, because essentially you're trying to burn energy which you could have just not eaten in the first place.
Yes.
Now, he's obviously trying to get a cardiovascular performance outcome, so calories is secondary, doesn't really bother him.
Yep.
But it's a nice example of, over time, if he gets really, really good at running and that running technique gets even tighter and he gets fitter and more efficient and that 7Ks is just a breeze, how few calories he might actually expend over time doing that process.
Especially if he was in coinciding that with energy restriction over time as well. Like
absolutely.
He would get some, you would think, some adaptation. That's sort of what Luke is going to talk about, which is absolutely fascinating. Before we go to Luke, I will say this is something that I spoke about with Menno. I think a lot of our listeners will be familiar with Mr. Henselman's. There's a few good podcasts. There's a few with us as well, but there's certainly a few good ones out there you could listen to Menno on. I suggest you do. But we were talking about... I think he called it the cell studies. Don't quote me on that one, but I think it was called the cell study. And what it is, it's a new study. They looked at a big meta-analysis. And long story short, because I said, "Yeah, cool, man. Just tell me what it means." And he was suggesting that the greater evidence-based scientific community, are suggesting that BMR multiplied by 2.5 seems to be the upper threshold of output you can go to, after which it starts to become constrained. So it's not, you can't just keep doing more and more and more, and that would make, from an evolutionary standpoint, make perfect sense. And this what Luke will talk about is there's two groups, one that does a ton of activity and one that doesn't, and the one that does a ton doesn't burn tons more energy. It's had some sort of adaptation, and probably they've reached that point where it's that 2.5 or beyond times BMR. So say, for example, how do you work that out, and does it have merit and carry over to what we're doing? Probably for Gen Pop, not so much. Like, it's to actually exceed that 2.5 times, and this is just in output. So I'm not talking about energy in, I'm just talking about doing more and more cardio. So eating the same or doing whatever, doing more and more and more and more training, it'll only get you to a point where past that point it starts to become constrained and you get less and less return on investment. Yeah. So it's sort of, those fitness bunnies that we all sort of reference, and, we see them doing hours and like 5 hours of cardio a day on 300 calories a day, and it's like, oh my God, they're still relatively out of shape. Like, they're not shredded by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, that would be a good example of where you do see it. Sometimes in physique prep, you might actually come across it, where you are pushing the energy output higher and higher to achieve more body composition change. So I think it has merit with being mindful of how high you can actually prescribe that energy output. So, for example, say, and this is BMR, so sedentary, hospital bed, that number, not the times that by your 3 to 5 sessions a week, multiplied by that number, that first number that you get. So for someone that, say, had a 2,000 BMR, that means it could be 2.5 times that, so it's 5,000 calories, So half would be 1,000, so 2.5 times that. So basically 5,000 total combined output. So you get your daily activity, you multiply 2,000 by 1.3 or 4, whatever it is, you put your training sessions in, that adds more onto it. So you can see 5,000 is a fair few calories, Yes. Like 2,000 BMR, there might be around 3,000 on a rest day, maybe, around... Well, you're starting to get up there. Then you train. You're probably 3.9, 3.8, 3.9 for a training day, depending on what sort of training you're doing. Chuck in an hour's cardio. Maybe that's another 400 or 500 calories. Now you're starting to get close to that. But then there's metabolic adaptation. There's this movement efficiency that's going to start creeping up when we get better. So that brings that output down a little bit. But you can see how you could be pushing up into that upper bracket potentially in that scenario. But what if it's a little bikini girl or someone that's 50 kilos, depending on what their age is? The BMR, say, is 1,200 calories or something. You multiply that by all the numbers. But say it is, for argument's sake, we can work it out. Say it's 1,000 calories is BMR, but that would be super light. It wouldn't be that. But if it was that, multiply that by 2.5, then that's 2,500 calories. So, okay, she might be around 1,600 on a non-training day, maybe 22 training day. well, it was only 2,500 that we said was her max output.
Before diminished returns.
Start to manifest. It's not, okay, 2,500, that's it, game over. It's like, no, after that you get less and less and less, and it becomes this constrained energy, which makes sense. You can't just do more and more and more because use all your body fat and drop dead. From an evolutionary standpoint, it makes perfect sense to me.
Yes.
So, but yeah, getting back to what I originally said, that's what Menno is saying, that according to the research and the different scenarios they've looked at, seems to be around that BMR times 2.5, the upper limit of your energy output, factoring on all your activity, your need, all that adds up to a point. And if it's past 2.5, that's where, and, there might be some coaches out there saying, damn, like I saw that in prep, I was prepping myself and I just did more and more cut. And I've experienced, and we've spoken about this, I just do more and more and more. And a couple of times when I've been cutting, I've just haven't really got much more return on investment. It's just like, oh my God, I'm doing so much and I'm just not getting any leaner. This is weird.
Yep.
So that would
bearing
be
in mind, because you'd also have to, over the process of some of those cuts that you've done, I mean, you've lost kilos of scale weight, so you'd have to keep adjusting that number.
Yep, and then moving from A to B just requires less energy because you're lighter.
Yep.
Losing muscle mass, okay, less metabolic rate.
Yeah.
So all those things would influence too. So that does get a little blurry as to where that point might be. But I guess take home message: just be mindful of how much extra activity you're doing or recommending to your athletes, because there will be a point where, after which, it's less, puts diminished returns. So you may find that you spin your wheels. What do? Well, then you got to look at more caloric manipulation. So you got to drop calories down further. So, you might have this number in your head. If you go past it, I'm not going to go past 1,500 for females. It's like, well, cool if you can get where you're going to get by not going below 15. But you might at times have to drop below that.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right, well, let's get deeper. Balls deep. Slapping up against
Slap it in. Let's go.
With Lucid Luke Tulloch. Groundskeeper Willy.
Lunch, Lady Doris. Have you got any grease?
Yes, we do.
Then grease me up, woman!
Okie dokie.
He got us that time.
Yeah. Lucid Luke from Lucid Health Coaching back in the studio again today, Rawdon.
AKA Groundskeeper Willy.
Groundskeeper Willy for another exciting instalment to upskill and inform and educate. On
Very professional
Under the
in
Bar
the new
podcast.
studio.
Now, this is a really interesting study, and something that probably you run up against more than I do these days with the extremities to which you push your athletes. But we're looking at the concept of the more you do, the more you can burn, and how far can you push that cart before you reach diminished returns.
Yeah, so it's sort of like, Luke will elaborate in a second, but, can we just keep adding more and more output and reduce input further and further and further? And is it a linear return on investment? Like, do we keep seeing more and more fat loss? Is that just the answer? Yeah, we're going to do a little bit more. Generally speaking, I think, most of the time that probably is the case, but there seems to be a good argument for it not being the case sometimes. And that's what Lukey's going to go into.
Certainly there would be, we probably all have an intuition that was the case, but Lucid, you've got an actual study that might back up those intuitions.
Yeah, and these guys actually stumbled upon it accidentally. So it's a really cool study, and kind of pushes us in a different direction as far as, where are we getting our results from when we're trying to get someone really lean? Should we be pushing the output side of things a bit more, or should we be maybe focusing a bit more on other things like the input side, in terms of what you're eating? So it's pretty cool. So basically what happened was there were some guys at Harvard who were really interested in how much more energy did our ancestors expend doing daily activities than we do today sitting in an office. And so they kind of went and found a whole bunch of tribespeople that still live the traditional lifestyle and thought, we'll measure their energy expenditure and we'll compare it to some office workers in the States.
And they thought this was probably as close to what it would have been like they're pretty traditional.
Yeah, so they still get up every day. They go to the watering hole and collect the water and carry it back, and they hunt every day and they gather every day. So they're living traditional lifestyle.
A lot of steps.
A lot of activity.
A lot of steps.
A lot of neat.
Yeah.
I think they were walking something like 15 k's a day. So
That's a fair bit. Okay. All right. So where do we go from here?
Cool. So basically, what happened is they went I should say probably the coolest thing about this study is that the methods that they used were the gold standard of everything. Right. So they actually used a method called the doubly labeled water method to measure energy expenditure. And basically it works on the premise that we know exactly how much oxygen and carbon dioxide is consumed and produced when you create a certain number of ATP and a certain amount of calories, and we can use these molecular traces to measure all of that. So it's a little bit of a complicated way of doing things. It's very, very expensive, and there's only like 2 machines in the entire United States that can actually analyze this stuff. But it is the absolute gold standard. It's extremely accurate, and that's exactly what the authors used in this study, which is very cool.
Nice.
Okay.
So what they did is they used this method. So they got verified, like scientifically verified accelerometers, so like a GPS type unit with like an activity tracker. They stuck some on some Chicago office workers for a few weeks and measured their energy expenditure.
These weren't training; these were just sedentary.
Average person. I think they were mainly sedentary, but maybe sort of worked out a couple of times a week type thing.
Just average Joe.
Average Joe. And then they went to a bunch of different tribespeople, different communities throughout the world. So they even actually, I think they may have had some people in like Mexico, like construction workers and stuff as well. But the main point was they kind of compared the Chicago office workers to this tribe in northern Tanzania that lives traditionally. So these were the people I mentioned that are walking like 12 to 15 Ks a day, living very traditionally. And so they did their whole experiment, they gathered all the data, and they came back and said, right, let's adjust for their body size, let's adjust for their gender, and just get an average of everything. And they expend basically the exact same amount of calories every day.
And what was that roughly? Like it wasn't that much. It was
it was like 2,400, I think it was. 2,400 calories off the top of my head. It was somewhere in that range on average. So it wasn't that much, and you're going far out. So they thought, oh man, we fucked this up. Yeah, like we've stuffed up somewhere.
When we discussed this, it was like, they're sleeping all day.
Yeah,
and then you're like, nah, they weren't sleeping.
They weren't sleeping. So they went back and they went, man, we fucked this up. How have we fucked it up? So they went back and went, maybe we collected this stuff wrong. No, we did it fine. No, maybe the accelerometers didn't measure things right. So they tested that and they went, no, it's fine. Maybe these guys who are, the tribespeople, maybe they're just so efficient because they walk all the time. Maybe they're just like, their movement patterns are super efficient or something.
Yeah.
Nah, exactly the same. Okay, fuck. Okay, so maybe they're just sleeping a lot more than we do. They actually slept on average 7 to 8 hours a night, so nothing extraordinary. So they're racking their brains going, well, what could possibly explain this? And so what they landed on was this idea of the constrained energy expenditure model. So the traditional model basically says that if you do 1 unit of physical activity, you expend 1 unit of energy expenditure. And so every time you do a unit of physical activity, you're expending the same amount of calories every time. And that's true. It takes a certain amount of calories to do a certain amount of work, right?
Yes.
But internally in the body, we can actually alter where we're directing all of our energy. So obviously the activity that we do requires a certain input of energy. There's no way of getting around that. Yeah. But there's a whole lot more going on in the body than just movement. There's the immune system. There's the reproductive system. There's all of our hormonal signaling and blah, 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 blah.
I spoke to James Kahn about this one, and our listeners will know James, pretty savvy med science student. He goes, nah, bullshit. I don't believe that constrained energy, because he said, a block of 10 kilos, I've got to move it A to B, gravity, all that sort of stuff. It X amount of energy. You can't get around that. It requires X amount of energy to move. So and then I said, well, when I was talking to Luke, all the stuff inside, they can preferentially shuttle energy wherever it wants, and if there's a demand but the environment isn't there, then it will, like you're elaborating now, it'll conserve energy elsewhere.
Yeah, exactly. And so this means that past a certain point, which we don't exactly know what that is, the body's going to start redirecting where it spends energy. And so it might start conserving the energy that it's going to spend on things like mainly the immune system and the reproductive system seems to be the main areas where it will sort of start to pull back a little bit. So the scientists basically went, they went back and worked on this theory, and they did a bunch of work on primates, so they did a bunch of work on rats and that type of stuff. So to give you an example, animals in captivity that basically don't move around as much expend roughly the same amount of energy as animals in the wild. So they actually did some work on some primates like chimpanzees and stuff and found, oh, okay, their energy expenditure is the same. That's weird. They got some rats in a lab and they basically made them exercise constantly throughout the day and had others that were just kind of sitting in a cage. And like, oh, okay, their energy expenditure is roughly similar too. So it's preserved across a bunch of different species. And so it seems that it might be some kind of evolved survival mechanism to preserve energy, right? Because let's say you're out, you're a tribes person, you got to try and hunt down some animal or whatever, and you got to spend a heap of energy to get water, build a shelter, maybe migrate your camp somewhere, maybe hunt some animals, whatever it is. Past a certain point, you're going to be expending so much energy that you probably just run out and then die, unless your body had some kind of mechanism for going, right, well, let's pull back on energy expenditure on some other less important stuff right now so we can spend it on all of this physical activity. And that seems to be what's happening. So once you hit a certain point, doing more activity doesn't actually mean your overall energy expenditure goes up very much. So you start getting diminishing returns.
Yes.
So we can directly see how this might start affecting our prescription when we're talking about, comp prep or getting people very lean or whatever. It means that, if you're throwing someone into, 15,000 steps a day, they're training 5 times a week, whatever it is, giving them another 2,000 steps a day is not going to yield the same results that it did way back early in the prep when they were walking 5,000 steps a day and you went, right, let's increase it to 10,000. You get a big result and you go, fuck yeah. Now you're at 15,000 and they've stalled and you go, well, what can we do? Well, what worked really well last time is we gave him an extra 5,000 steps to do. So you do the same thing again and lo and behold, not that much happens. And you're going, well, why is that? It worked really well before.
And I think a lot of our listeners would agree with that. There seems to be that point, where you've got to do more and more and more to get a similar progression on what you
100%.
did previously.
It's very interesting. Well, it's good to have, I guess, an understanding of the mechanism that's going on here, that life in general has some sort of narrow-ish constraint of energy expenditure.
Yeah.
And if you say you take someone from a base of low-level activity and give them activity, then energy expenditure will pick up, but only to a certain point. Take someone who's very active and give them more, and all these conservation mechanisms come in place to keep them within this channel. And if you...
No, I was just going to say that potentially, it's not absolute. This is always going to happen.
Yes.
And I spoke to Menno. Obviously, our listeners will know that I've done a lot with Menno, and he said, look, animal research, time and time again, like Luke referenced, but he said there's only been a few studies where they've seen it in humans, but he said for the adaptive... not the constraint, but the adaptive energy expenditure, which pretty much is what Luke explained at the start, 1 for 1. There's a lot of research to say that does exist, and that most of the time that is going to be what's happening. Reason. Yeah. But in this situation now, they're sort of questioning. They're questioning whether there is other scenarios at play. But more often than not, your investment of, generally speaking, doing more is going to yield the outcome, albeit potentially it won't be like when we started the cutting phase. You do have to do more and more and more.
Yes.
And adaptive thermogenesis probably comes into that. I want to cover that probably in our next topic that we're going to cover. But so don't think that, oh my God, well, we can only push for a bit and then time out. We're going to have to pull back and less is more and all this type of stuff. I think you're definitely that scenario, but like in my experience, I've seen it, obviously a handful of times, but more often than not, it's going to be you do more, you're going to get more of a return on investment.
Yes, I guess if you think about the case example, this tribe in Tanzania, I mean, that's pretty much as extreme an example as you can find with that amount of activity with probably a genetic predisposition that's been handed down and evolved over time.
Yes.
Very interesting. And I guess if you think about the animals as well, I guess that's why reproduction happens in cycles around seasons when food is plentiful, so 100%. They can live their existence, compromising immune system and reproduction, doing what they need to do to get by. And then when the fruit is plenty, then the pressure's off and they can all start mating and they get on. They
go for it.
They get on heat and it all gets exciting.
100%. But I think what it speaks to is maybe just planning properly. So like at the start of a prep, don't throw all of your toys in at once and use everything at once, right? Like there's a place where you can strategically use things, knowing that yeah, we've still got some headroom to work with here. However, if you're starting, 10 weeks out and you've got 20,000 steps a day and an hour of cardio and you're training in the gym for an hour as well, it's like, yeah, you got to know where to go, right? Yeah. Which means that you got nothing left and you're probably not going to get much return even if you do add more.
All right, so is that the because we don't want to dangle the carrot and say, well, guys, you're pretty much screwed if this is happening. So we do want to actually give our listeners a bit of an insight into how we can get around that. So, okay, perfect world, and this is what Broderick says as well, like, well, that's just because you screwed up as a coach. You know, like you didn't work it out, you did too much too soon or whatever, played, all, like you said, all your cards at once. So, perfect planning, okay, that's a real world, that's what we all hope we do, but that's not always the case. We're X amount of time away from D-Day, things still need to be, what can our listeners, what sort of scenarios can we actually look at to get past that point? Do we have, because again, I've spoken to Matt about this, and he said, well, he sort of just shrugged and said, well, they've just got to do more and more and more. They're the ones that do have to end up doing 4 hours of cardio a day and eat, 1,000 calories to actually get to the finish line.
You know what, like, you're going to have situations where it's like, it goes around a lot in the industry today, like, these people were ruined by their last prep. They were eating, 1,000 calories a day and doing all this cardio. It's like, mate, sometimes that is necessary for some people. Yeah. You know what I mean? And it is for a short period of time, and we all know that going through a prep is not healthy. Exactly. It's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be really fucking hard. Yep. Your body's not going to want to get that lean. Yep. You're essentially, it's competitive hunger. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to suck.
Starvation.
So, yeah, it is.
Starvation.
Exactly. So certainly not advocating of like being too conservative as a coach. And sometimes you're going to have to go like, look, we don't have an option but to give you an extra half an hour of cardio a day. Yep. That's just how it is.
Yeah.
So again, let's be real. This is an extreme scenario.
Yes.
Prep is always an extreme scenario.
Yes. So we're not talking about Gen Pop fat loss. We're talking about those last. Okay, they're down to 10%. You want to get 10.
And you know what? Some people have come in and interpreted this as like, oh, well, we shouldn't really be focusing on activity to get people lean, and I think that's wrong because not only do you get energy expenditure from activity, but you get a whole bunch of other benefits from activity. Giving people more steps per day has mental health benefits, cardiovascular benefits, 100%. All that type of stuff. Weight training obviously has its unique benefits. Yep. So certainly I'm not advocating going, well, let's not focus on activity at all and only focus on their food intake. I certainly think that being as active as possible is always going to be the better way to go.
Well, referencing back to our last segment that we covered with you, the electron transport chain, like why don't we upregulate that, do a little bit more 100%. Cardio and all that stuff, all the 100%. Machinery. And that's something that if you recall, Brod's Tommy, he will often say, it takes a little while to get all that machinery. He puts it in very layman's terms. Well, look, the enzymatic pathways have to upregulate. The machinery has to switch on, and that's one of the reasons why he doesn't like doing refeed periods, because it starts, switching off various pathways. And like I said, we'll cover that on another topic. But yeah, that's what. And it's nice to know that. Not that your skill set is more profound on physiology and biology than Brod's is. He's probably just dumbing it down for the rest of us. But there are, like you pointed out previously, enzymatic pathways that do become far more efficient the more of that energy system we use. So.
Definitely.
And how dependent is body fat levels in reaching those points of diminished returns? If you've got someone who's very overweight and they've been doing a million things all at once and eating very little, but there's still a lot of body fat, do they come up against these walls?
Yeah, I think, like Rawdon said, sometimes it's just a factor of time. I think people get impatient sometimes, you know what I mean? It's like, when I make a change to someone's diet personally, working with General Pop, I go, right, you got to stick to that for 2 weeks minimum.
Yep.
I'm not interested in what your scale says after a week. I don't care.
Yep.
Give us at least 2 weeks and maybe longer. The fact of the matter is, if you are doing a lot of activity and you aren't eating an excessive amount, like, the body fat will come down. You know what I mean? With that said, obviously the leaner you get, the harder it's going to be to keep burning body fat. Your body's just not going to want to do it. So I think it's, in a general prop sense, I don't think you're really going to run into problems. No. You know what I mean? If someone's saying that they're not eating that much or they're moving heaps and they're still like grossly overweight, there's some kind of communication issue happening. Either they are misreporting, and probably unintentionally, because that happens a lot, or they're just misunderstanding what you're telling them to do. Like they're not weighing something, or they're not, whatever.
Lost in translation. I think you're talking about what you often hear in the industry is the fitness bunny. They're doing all the cardio, but they're still out of shape. But they're not like fat out of shape. They're like,
no, exactly.
Okay, they look sort of like there's weird shit going on. And I think that, let me know your thoughts on this. I think there's definitely a cortisol-mediated total stress load that seems to manifest as and I know Lyle, and I spoke to Brods about it, and Lyle's the go-to guy, but unfortunately we burnt that bridge, and he'll never, ever talk to me again.
So
but anyway, yeah. But he's like, he'll talk about this, this water swoosh, I think he calls it, but you lower stress, and that's where I think those refeed periods and stuff can be advantageous, is they drop total stress load, and then it's not that you're a super coach and you've magically beat the laws of human biology and physiology and you've induced fat loss. It is you've changed body composition, so there's been a dramatic water shift due to total stress being suppressed for a period of time. So I think that scenario where they are. And often they can still be burning fat. It's just that they can't see it because there's just this
water
offensive fluid. Yeah, this
and I mean, like,
retention.
look, it's also it's so much like visually that goes on. Like, if someone's got a ton of muscle, I mean, they could be like 15% body fat, but look shredded just because they're that jacked, or they get good lighting, or the distribution of body fat's just favorable. Like my abs show up quite easily for me, so I can quite easily be 15% body fat and look like I got a big six pack, and I'm like 10%, but I'm not. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, maybe with the calves and the arms, shredded veins everywhere. I am actually shredded. Yeah, I'm shredded.
Yeah,
no problem.
Yeah, yeah, totally. So it's. I think the big thing with this research is that it's sparked. A debate and an interest in it, and this was done in 2012, by the way. So, there's more research going on. These guys have followed up. There's the lead author his name is Herman Ponza, and he did a good...
he sounds like a lead author.
He does, from Harvard, right? Yeah.
Professor Ponza.
And he's done a good podcast on Sigma Nutrition, just explaining his research, which is quite a good listen. But I think, like, really the takeaway for us is that there is more research coming. It's something to bear in mind. And as far as applicability... within what we're doing, it's just something to kind of keep in the back of your mind and understand that it's a little bit more complex than like do more work equals more energy expenditure necessarily.
And there may be a scenario where you're going to get that point of diminished returns.
Yeah, for sure.
Fascinating.
All right, I think one final takeaway, Rawdon, you should invest in one of those GPS accelerometers or whatever they are for your athletes.
Well, I mean, look, Luke will chuckle, and our listeners know that I tend to do things, practice what I preach. And remember that time when, because it was sort of like, okay, X amount of energy spent, but I'm getting lighter, so how can I increase that? I'll wear a backpack. So I remember I had the 20-litre bottle of, I think it was a 10-litre cask in my backpack. I bought this cheap backpack, and I was just going for a walk, Luke, and and then I said, see you guys, and everyone's watching me leave lift, and our lunch break. But it was
hilarious.
Yeah, it was quite funny.
It is very funny.
It was very scientific, Tom. Professor Dubois.
Excellent.
From Henry Kendall High School.
Well, there he is, lucid, once again, illuminating and understandable. Very good.
Thanks, man.
Cheers, man.
There he was. Lucid Luke Tulloch. It's always a pleasure have him.
It's Flex Luke Tulloch.
I'm used to it. I've done it so many times.
He's Groundskeeper Willy. He'll always be Groundskeeper Willy to us.
He's got a wonderful method of breaking down complex human physiology into easily understandable stuff. He's great.
Digestible.
And he's a good friend. Friend of the podcast.
And he's got a fiery red beard and he's jacked, so we like him for those reasons too.
Very much so. Now we better start wrapping things up, Rawdon. You've got a very antsy client circling downstairs, waiting for you.
Okay, anyone that wants to get in touch with you?
TomHewett.com.au.
And for myself, just Instagram, social media. You can Google the website, but there's nothing there, so probably Instagram or Facebook.
Thanks for tuning in once again. We value you highly.
Yes. See you next time.
Bye.
Liftoff.